The Far Road. Once on a time when the moon was traveling, he came upon the stars and the great swath of light that they made. He looked around the stars and smiled, for they were great and powerful things, old and proud, and as some would say, set in their ways. Now this is far after the time which we know to be present, and the moon is furthered away from the earth's visage, not once or twice, but 3 times. And the humans have long walked the far road after they came of age, for the rest of their life, and they learned great things. Thus is the journey that the moon was on. He himself was on his own far road. Now the moon approached the stars and cried out, "Ho, the stars!" He was cold and weary from the road, and wished for a place to stay a night or 2. The stars turned when they heard this thing, and smiling warmly spake, "Hello, the moon!" But they said nothing more, patiently waiting for the moon to say what he would. Again, not for the first time that day, the moon smiled. He appreciated the stars' patience. Other things like the comets had been too eager to know what the moon wanted, and the solar winds simply didn't want to know at all, until the moon gave them a gift. But the stars seemed wise, and so the moon opened his mouth and said, "Stories and things I bring from distant lands, strange wonders. I would show you these things, if you could afford a place by the hearth." One star smiled widely, genuinely eager to see these new things that the moon might bring. She nodded and patted a seat next to her, making room for the moon to sit down. But the moon frowned in spite of this, for that star did not accept the customary universal traveler's greeting. If she had, she would have said, "Strange things you bring, and we will meet this with new things for you. Come, and we will have wine and water in equal measure." But she did not say it, and this perturbed the moon. But he sat down all the same, glad for the chance to rest his weary core. The star who had invited the moon to sit now faced him eagerly, laying her hands upon her legs, trying to hold them flat to quell her excitement. First the moon set down a large rucksack, and from it he produced a length of silver glass. "First I've ice from the asteroid belt. Everlasting it is, for space is a cold place. This one is from the old king of comets, who crashed into a moon, obliterating it. It was given me by the comets themselves, after I carried a wounded meteorite back to them and nursed it back to health." At this, the star clapped 3 quick claps and grinned her radiant grin around at the surrounding stars, quite amused. But she was met only with slight frowns, and she fell to a slow silence, waiting for the next thing the moon would show, in a more complacent manner now than before. The moon looked about at the faces around him. Behind his mask of outgoing, inside he was having misgivings. He had heard that the stars could often be cold beings to outsiders, polite but not welcoming. Only the young girl before him had reacted in a fine way, and even now her light seemed to be duller. But in accordance with the oldest custom in the world, the counseling of the stray singer, in which Odin gave wise advice to a great traveler, the moon once again opened his rucksack, and a second thing he presented. "A second thing I have, and it is a special thing. It is a great bellows filled with a great air. When the earth came closer to the sun, its winds grew stronger as it spun faster and faster, until it matched the solar winds themselves. I introduced this wind to the ever-changing currents by chaining up and pulling a piece of the roaring cyclone up and out of the Earth's atmosphere, and giving it to the beautiful gales of space. I introduced a new color to the solar winds, and they gave me all the colors of the wind." At this he pressed down on the bellows, and out of it came air, and the air was colored, red and purple and blue, yellow and green, and all colors previously unimagined, swirling around in beautiful zephyrs. And the stars found this thing to be a beautiful thing, as they were blown back by the great force of the warm wind, and their cold atmosphere was dispelled. Now they smiled and laughed and danced with the eddies. Only the oldest did not move about, for they could not, but they did grin widely. Now the girl laughed as well, glad for the lightening of the atmosphere. The space around them was bright now, as the light of 100 suns grew stronger. And indeed, the moon was happy, for he had made a place that he would be happy to stay in for a time or 2. The stars had merriment for some hours, dancing with each other in the eddies of wind, and the moon danced with the girl. They had held back a great tension for some time, and now they released it all in a beautiful way. But soon they exhausted themselves in their energy, and they laid about the pavilion where the moon walked to, so that they might see the third and last great wonder he had in store. Before the moon showed them, he allowed the stars to come into a restful state. Curious, he thought, how if you show a people the right thing, they seem to have known you from birth. Then he reached into his rucksack, unsure of the next great thing to show. But perhaps by luck or perhaps by fate, his knuckles brushed against a small glass cylinder, and he smiled, knowing immediately what he would give. From the rucksack he produced a small enclosed jar of dirt, and this was the third thing. This is my most treasured possession. A time ago I, the moon, belonged to Earth, and to the humans that roamed it. But as the sun became larger, its gravity became stronger, and pulled my lovely planet away from me, and the humans had nothing to brighten their night. The star sat forward at this, prepared to console the moon, but he continued on. This is dirt from the Earth, from the far road, where the humans learned about themselves and about their world and about me. The girl, who had been leaning her head against the moon's shoulder, looked up at him now. What all did they learn? The moon made a show of screwing up his face, seemingly trying to remember and then smiling as he did. Of themselves, clarity of voice, clarity of mind, clarity of self. Then they learned that the best way they could be happy was to spread happiness, and the best way to feel love is to love others. Of Earth they learned to find the beauty in all aspects of it, both what was of Mother Nature and what was made by man. Of me they learned of the push and pull, the repetition and constancy I provided, and the strength of being grounded firmly upon land. And they loved me in the same way that I loved them. But now I am gone from Earth. It was taken from me, and the humans can no longer see in the dark. There was a great silence in the air. The eddies of colored winds slowed and stopped, and even the swath of light itself seemed to strain to listen. The whole world was as if it was poised before a great leap, silent and charged with a sudden, solemn energy. The girl laid her hand upon the moon's own and thus distracted him from the shed tears of the stars around him. But soon the moon drew his gaze away toward the three great wonders laid out before him. Everlasting ice, the colors of the winds, and dirt from the far road. And the oldest star in the pavilion stood slowly and said, "3 things have been given us. Come, the moon, sit near the hearth and rest, and drink water and wine in equal measure. Allow us 7 days to prepare, and 3 things we will give to you." At this the moon started. It was the customary universal traveler's rule. If a man is near the hearth and gives 3 gifts, 7 days later 3 must be returned, with water and wine in equal measure. The moon spoke now, tentatively. "So you do want the ice?" The elder star shook his head, smiling. Not even everlasting ice is for stars to have. But the third gift that was given us was the counseling of the stray singer. You have presented us with the traveler's code after we had forgotten it, and have made us happy once again. For this you are truly a great traveler. All the other stars nodded their consent. Quickly a comfortable bed was made for the moon near the edge of the hearth, and it was a bed big enough for 2. And indeed the star who had invited the moon so warmly told the moon her name and joined him in his bed. And for 7 days the moon stayed, soothed by the calming light of the swath of stars, and he slept soundly. The stars had presented him with 3 gifts, as was promised. The first was the core of a sleeping sun, and it lit his way as he journeyed through the darkness of space. It reminded him much of the girl, and this warmed his heart, even as he left her behind in the pavilion, after the 7 days were over and done. The second gift was an aurora. If ever he was lost, he would simply need to call forth the beautiful light, and a trail would be laid out for him to follow toward the nearest safe harbor. While the moon liked this gift the least, for he did not believe in being lost, he appreciated the sentiment, and at times when he was feeling lonely, he called the light forward and watched the patterns. It reminded him very much of the colors of the wind, and he felt that the stars knew this. The third gift was a thing of beauty, a stroke of genius, truly. A cold nova, it was, and it would only show in the dark. The moon spread the supernova now near Earth, and he knew that this would brighten the dark side of the world each night. For the moon, each lighted night was a true gift, and this third gift was more than just one. It was a gift that kept on giving.